Thank you very much. Thank you all for joining us today. And let me also start by thanking our two partner organizations, UNHCR and IOM, for the excellent cooperation. 4 years ago, Vincent referred to this as well, when UNHCR and MMC presented the first edition of this report. At the launch here at the Palais, I said, this is not the first report outlining all these abuses, and sadly, I'm afraid it won't be the last. And I also said, but it should be the last. And I sincerely hope we won't sit here again in a year's time and present another report with all these statistics on the incredible and unacceptable levels of abuses refugees and migrants are facing all along these routes, end of quote. Yet here we are, not 1 year later, but 4 years later. And during those 4 years, again, there have been many other reports as well, documenting what's happening along these routes by each of our organizations and also by other agencies. So honestly, I really do not want to be here, and I think we should not be here, presenting yet another report, presenting yet again the unimaginable levels of violence refugees and migrants are facing on these routes. It is really unacceptable, and as we say in the foreword to this report, this remains a stain on our collective conscience. In the previous foreword, we said this report adds to a mounting evidence base that can no longer be ignored. So the question is, has it been ignored? And maybe ignored is not the right word, as it certainly has not been ignored by us and by many other organizations and many other people who are trying to help migrants every single day along these routes. But I think it has been ignored in the sense that it has not gotten any better, on the contrary, possibly. And of course, it's difficult to compare this in a fully representative and methodologically reliable way, how the situation has changed. But I think that's even a little bit beyond the point at this stage when we present this report. And of course, I'm representing a research organization, so I could talk here about the methodology and about the research and about the data and comparing the different percentages, but in a way I really don't want to. I want to talk about the people. This report is not about data, ultimately, it's about people. For our previous report, Vincent mentioned it as well, we interviewed 16,000 people. For this report, we interviewed 31,500 people. And this report is also not about their status or the labels that we may put on them. It's about the individual human beings. It's men, women, fathers, mothers, with family and friends behind them, on their way to find safety, on their way to find better opportunities for themselves, their families, to find freedom from whatever it is that makes them unable to live a free life where they are. And our people, our enumerators as MMC on the ground, who are stationed in so many different migration hubs along these routes, sit down with them every single day, talk to them, and conduct long, in-depth surveys to collect all this information every single day. And we are really grateful to all these people, these 31,500 refugees and migrants who took time to share their very personal experiences with us. And while they're on their way, they face these unacceptable levels of violence, or even they may lose their lives, as Laurent said as well. Just last week, and this is a route we haven't covered in this report, but just last week we heard that 5,000 people died on the Atlantic route to the Canary Islands in the first 5 months of this year. That's an increase of 700% compared to the same period last year. And we also know, even though we don't have fully accurate numbers, and indeed it is an underestimation, that countless others die on the land routes up to the Mediterranean coast, possibly even more than at sea. So this is really one important notion from this new report that I would like to highlight, is that we should not forget about what's happening on the land routes, on these routes through the desert. And we really need to increase our capacity for search and rescue in the desert on these land routes. Another key word coming from this report, also mentioned already by the other panelists, is accountability. So this report also explores who are the perpetrators of violence. And common perpetrators are smugglers, they are among the perpetrators, other criminal groups, but also, as Vincent alluded to, state officials like police, military, and border guards. But whoever they are, whichever category, they should be held accountable. But at the moment, much of this is happening in a situation of near complete impunity. So even though there has been a little bit of progress, I would say, compared to the previous report, we have seen that a few high-profile traffickers who were operating out of Libya have been arrested. But we need much more of that. And I think we need to stop going after the very low-level pickup drivers in Niger, for example. But we should really follow the money and catch the big guys and the ones that are directly responsible for all this violence. What we also need to change is the dynamics in the current migration partnerships that we see between Europe and third countries. I think Europe has a lot to offer in exchange for cooperation on migration management, legal migration pathways, access to trade markets, development cooperation. And I think in exchange, it should be able to say that adherence to the highest human rights and protection standards is something that is non-negotiable in these partnerships. Yet it seems that the fear of migration across Europe sometimes maybe stands in the way of being able to explicitly call out what's happening along these routes, and I think that's simply unacceptable. Finally, we need a whole-of-route approach, and I'm not saying whole-of-route in the sense that that it might sometimes be understood by some, which could be translated as let's stop migrants as far as possible from Europe as possible, and as early on the route as possible. I'm saying whole-of-route in the sense that at every step of the way, and through cooperation between countries, between international and local organizations, at all levels, national levels, regional levels, and importantly also the local and city level, we ensure that people all along these routes are able to exercise their rights, they are protected, they have access to assistance, and they see alternatives to onward irregular movement, so that they are able to make a deliberate choice, a deliberate personal choice about whether to move on or not. Finally, just to briefly bring things back to the global governance of migration. In 2018, the Global Compact for Migration was adopted. It includes Objective 7, address and reduce vulnerabilities in migration. And it includes Objective 8, save lives. And I think when it comes to these mixed migration routes across Africa towards Europe that are covered in this report, we have to conclude that we're failing on these objectives and that we have to do better. I started by saying I didn't want to be here and that we should not need another report, but apparently we do. I think that's quite clear from this report. And even if this report doesn't necessarily present a new picture, that is a concerning finding in and of itself. And imagine we would say, well, you know, we know all of this already from the previous report, from other reports. Let's not do another report. I think that would mean that we're basically giving up. It means we would accept the situation as it is. It means we would normalize it. But we don't accept it, and we should never accept it. And as Vincent said as well, we should never get used to it. So, well, again, repeating what I said last time, I sincerely hope we won't be sitting here again with another report. We will, if we need to. And meanwhile, I know that people on the ground are doing every day the best they can. People working for our organizations and many other organizations to provide better protection for people on the move. But I hope that this report will also help a little bit, not least by convincing our leaders, our politicians, our policymakers, to help develop better policies and shape an environment that leads to the end of this unacceptable violence that refugees and migrants are facing. Thank you.